Hello and welcome back to Call Center Helper. My name is Xander Freeman and we have just launched our latest research. Today, we're talking all about AI expectations, specifically where our readers see AI enhancing their omnichannel and CCaaS capabilities within the next year. To help with this discussion, I'm so excited to once again be joined by Martin Hill Wilson of Brainfood Consulting and frequent contributor to CCH. Martin, hello.
Hello, I'm very excited to be in on this conversation.
No, thank you so much for joining us today, but also, like I say, providing your analysis on our research. So I mentioned it earlier on there. Let's talk about AI expectation. The three areas our audience voted for in the next 12 months where they're seeing the most benefits for AI increasing their capabilities for omnichannel and CCaaS were chatbots, virtual agents, real-time assist, and self-service capabilities. No huge surprise in those three there, but I mean, what do you really
Well,
see from this data?
I tell you what I eked out from that because I'm a long-term viewer
Mm,
of your survey, and sometimes I think, gosh, doesn't it move slowly?
mm,
I've seen half a centimeter on video or something.
yeah.
And what's really encouraged me about this was how universal those scores were
Mm,
and how consistent they were.
mm,
And in fact, you could argue, I can't precisely remember the numbers, but there were two blocks. Everybody was doing something in
mm,
all the major categories that we had.
yeah.
So to me, looking back at it, my initial response to it was, gosh, people really do seem to have got the message about this and universally decided to invest in a comprehensive way. So I thought that was probably the single most exciting thing that the survey put up initially.
Mm,
And clearly people had believed it was time to do something, translated that back into stakeholder needs, customers, employees, people on the front line, won the argument internally to do that, and probably benefited from the broader headwinds, that there is now in terms of AI investment, and we're doing it. And it was pretty much 50, 60% of that cohort that decided to say yes to it we're in the process of getting on with it. So we've really moved outside of early adoption into, middle maturity.
But I think you said it best in your analysis in the survey itself. So with the top three being around chatbots, virtual agents, agent assist, and self-service, those are three things that, and again, in your own words, the brands that do that well set the bar for everyone else, and you're always
Yeah.
compared to them. If you can do it right, it works amazingly. But it's also so easy to get that stuff wrong. It just shows the expectation is there, specifically within the next 12 months, but you have to take it one step at a time.
Well, I will also say on the back of that is that having made my point about centimeter progress,
Mm,
whilst those years have ticked by, customers certainly haven't been ticking by, and they've actually got quite ticked off with the lack of capability to be express themselves digitally, and to have their expectations for, quite frankly, let me get on, do it when and how I wish to do it. So that kind of confidence and autonomy that we've got, that lifestyle around of just getting on with it, and also speaking to people when we want to speak to people. But that central first component of make self-service actually effective most of the time is the central thing that people are saying, and to that degree make it effortless, make it effective, and all those kind of bits and pieces. And I think that message has finally dropped for brands, that they've got to really get that together. I mean, we used to call that being digital, but I never like that artificial divide because I don't know what digital isn't then, if you sort of mean. But
yeah.
anyway, modernizing our ability to communicate and the customer's ability to engage with the brand seems to have landed big time. And therefore, which will be interesting, I don't know if you're going to pick this up elsewhere,
Mm.
we should see an uptick in how customers respond to that. Now, it might be that we're underwater in terms of actually not meeting those expectations. So it will take some time before people get super happy about it. But assuming that people have done a decent job of implementing it, we ought to be getting closer. But, and I know I said this also in my research, the tools by themselves are not actually going to deliver that experience. There are other things that need to be done as well. Um, and the bits I picked up, which I don't know if were in explicit in the survey, is pretty much everyone says, guess what? AI requires excellent data.
And I mean, that's the exact next point. If you look at just past those initial three, you're starting to see an increasingly commonplace focus on analytics and data as part of this conversation, which is what you expect, right? It's what, if we're going to do it right, this is what you need. You need the two working together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, data comes in various forms. There's the data around of, I mean, I think the way I've always thought in very top level terms about what we learn from a conversation and an interaction with a customer
Mm,
is there are four basic things we know about customers, and a huge variety of customers. You've only got to get into the generational conversation. Boom. Then you've got a huge thing about why, what's their intent? What were they trying to do today? Then I think massively important, which is about the journey and the channels, what mix was chosen
mm,
within all of that. And then you've got outcomes. And those outcomes aren't just about for the customer, the outcomes also for the advisor and for the contact center, the brand as a whole. And combine that with just the day's trade, and already you've got massive complexity from an analytical perspective.
mm,
Multiply that by then the trends in the week and the month and the year, and you have an enormously rich, complex data set that previously, quite frankly, as we all knew, was invisible, but increasingly now is captured by AI-driven analytics, at least after the event, and increasingly real time,
mm.
which will influence the trajectory, the pathways, and the outcome of the journey. And if it's done live, the ability for the advisor to plug into that real time commentary and to influence and be affected in terms of compensating for what seems to be, an issue as far as the customer is concerned. Now that's just miraculous. So I'd say that's one area of real time or indeed normal analytics that gets populated into dashboards, interventions, alerts, whatever you want. And indeed, if that gets even better, we're starting to go into the world then, aren't we, of predictive
Mm.
and proactive. And that again is massive in terms of the impact on customers, the reduction in terms of volume inbound, if you can fix it before it takes place. And that trajectory, if you're really good at that analytics, is a fascinating future. You talked about Inside Hub. That's a whole other conversation. But if you want to reprofile yourself around of strategic value, it's got to be the next big mountain to climb if you're not doing it already as a call center. It's a massive, massive opportunity there. But then there's the other element of data, which I would say is data back to the more traditional point around of self-service. That data we normally refer to as knowledge. And interestingly, I think accessing what you want and only what you want quickly and easily has been a mountain. And knowledge management has been an expensive, complex thing to manage. And the net result is often only partial success, either in discovery or in terms of the completeness, the freshness, and the value of. Now, again, AI and variations of AI can build a much more intuitive ability to access it, to index it, to refresh it, to summarize it, and make it really much more useful. And in the world that we live in with LLMs and hallucinations and the fear of that, then the techniques that we're beginning to see as being actually quite common, although you might not, as a non-technical person, have known it, we're now plumbing in our LLMs to be much safer in terms of how they come up with their answers through plumbing in a technique called RAG, which is retrieval augmentation generation, which is, again, a very powerful technique where you know that the answers are going to be predicated only on your own approved material. And then there's another technique which I'm just beginning to catch up with, which is knowledge graphs, which again, if you got off on Google and what they've been doing for years or any really massive data, you know that knowledge graphs have helped out the internet at scale. And now, as we get into trying to use data and knowledge at scale in real time, they become a technique which is even more important at the architectural level of what we're going to be doing with data. So again, I think that RAG and things like data graphs are going to become techniques, geeky techniques, but the net result is the right data at the right time is easily and effortlessly available. And if that becomes the case, that's one less conversation that's needed, unless there's other things needed in the conversation, for a live assistant to do. all of which says our resolution rates around of self-serve really ought to start to improve substantially. And back to the point we started with, that's the point at which I think the self-serve style customer goes, do you know what? That was easy. That worked. I trust it. I'm going to do it again. I get into a habit. And again, to your point, a new benchmark is set for everybody else then saying, if they can do it, why not you?
I think it will be really interesting to see how this conversation or how this data point actually retreats because obviously we've been fortunate enough to do these surveys for years on years on years. 2026, I think will be really interesting to look back and say, right, okay, what's actually happened within that time frame and what are people looking forward to the next 12 months as well. These things move so fast, but I think you're right. I think with some of the stuff, if you look at what we asked last year compared to this year as well, you can see what has changed there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like some of the stuff like RAG and the other elements coming into play, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this data specifically changes moving into 2026 and beyond.
The other thing, sorry, just before we move there, just a little shout out because I do know that sometimes people get rather upset around of service design, UX, which I think is an essential component of this, by the way. One of the interesting things for me always is the value of live assistance in terms of what it compensates for, right? When we're talking about complexity, emotive, blah, 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 that's obviously human and we school people up on that. But actually, they also act as invisible compensation for the workflow, the system is slow, the ambiguity of a customer's intent and not clarity, what they really want, and all the rest of the stuff. And when you remove that, when you make it automated and self-serve, all of that becomes exposed, or all of that somehow needs to get designed into the system. So I would also say to people that I think the service design community has actually had a tough time over the last couple of years, and actually a lot of them have been gotten rid of out of organizations. But it is an essential skill. If you spent a shed load on AI and a shed load on RAG and a shed load on semantic search and all the rest of it, don't imagine that customers will flock to it unless you really have gone through the discipline and the skill that service designers will provide you with. And one thing that will always tell you is drink your own champagne continuously because the customer will still surprise you in terms of what they see, what they miss, the signposting you think is effective but isn't effective, the ambiguity and the whatever, whatever, whatever. And you've really got to squeeze all that stuff out until it is absolutely rock solid and works for all spectrum of customers and situations. And once you got there, you will then see self-serve grow in the way that you'd hoped.
I mean, I suppose my final question for you there was going to be putting yourself in the shoes of a sort of customer contact leader. What would your key takeaways be from this data? But I think in a way you've already answered it there. You've answered quite succinctly there. If you're interested in self-service capabilities, this should be your key takeaway from this. If you're interested in automating agent assist, this should be your key takeaway. But just to summarize then from your side, so I've
Well,
got
I think what it indicates whether or not you see yourself as a purchaser of a single system, as in CCaaS, call center in a box in the sky, or indeed you prefer to roll your own and buy bits and pieces and plumb it together, whichever version of that you go for.
Mm,
We're now appearing to adopt what this new generation represents,
mm,
the ability to seamlessly bring data, workflow, and communication channels together.
mm,
The language of orchestration, i.e., connecting it and coordinating it, is again endemic and built into the proposition of those systems collaborating and working together. Um, and I think that people have invested or appear to be investing in certainly the obvious parts that you need to make that work.
mm,
Tech enables, so you've still got to design the experience. And a lot of that is some of the trickier stuff because it's workflow, it's connection to other systems. We're not always in an API connected world. We're still in legacy world.
mm.
We're also living in a world of automation, which might be as clunky and difficult as RPA, although it has played its role. But if you're looking at agentic as the next thing that's turning up, it's miles and miles away from that first proposition. So I think a lot of people still have to concentrate very strongly on the plumbing and then very strongly on the pulling out of that plumbing and orchestration, the experience that the customer is expecting, and your ability to finesse it and deliver it and improve on it. So I think that I would summarize it by saying that it's got all the right indications that people are putting their money where they should be, but they should not be imagining that it's just a switch on and leave thing. IVR should have told us that 3 decades ago. Um, and that what we're really building is a significantly different way of contacting between brands and between customers. And this is really just the first tranche. So as you get deeper into it, and indeed your favorite technology vendor comes and tells you, guess what's new this week, this month, this year, you also need to have that put within a frame of reference
Mm,
round of make it simple. What does it look like? Here's a very simple question for any teams, which is if you find it difficult to describe, or at least feel that you're able to describe the experience of engaging with customers in 2030 for the customer, for the frontline staff,
mm,
whoever they may be at that point, and then for the management of that process, you need to spend some more time doing that because it's a pathway from where you are now to that outcome, and you can't just busk it from today by going tick in the box omni-channel.
mm,
Now we're home and dry. Not at all. You're just starting in that. So it behoves you to think about what are we really attempting to do. And indeed, one of the really interesting discussions, which we touched on a little bit, is of course how does this world of AI, which we normally think of being automation, interface with and augment and collaborate with people?
mm.
And at the moment, we've just got a very vague, fuzzy kind of description, which is called augment versus replace. That has to mature into operational clarity. And that has to be very precise because you need to be able to justify the investment in how people play their role. One thing you do know is if you go and talk to customers, they insist on it. And that insistence isn't people of retired age, not at all. It's from 17 onwards, depending on use case, depending on situation. So it's a very nuanced, complex picture. And indeed, one of the interesting points, which is probably more terrifying than anything, is that many people say, for whatever the reasons, the volume of contact is going to grow.
Mm.
And that's before you even get the even more terrifying idea that once AI agents become part and parcel of how we as customers go about our daily business, you have got a potential stream of inbound that you don't even want to think about right now. So this is why, actually the survey is dead interesting. And I would say in summary, you've done it just in time. You've done it just in time to get the tail end, because otherwise you would have got overwhelmed with the tsunami that's about to happen. But you've now built yourself a good foundation from which to quickly iterate. And to your point on the second part of this conversation, the analytics, the insight is absolutely imperative because those are your headlights in terms of what you need to build next.
Perfect. Martin, as always, you've given me so much to take away with here. I'm sure our readers will get a lot out of not only this conversation, but the report itself. If you do want to read more about Martin's insights on this topic and others as well, on the multitude of different questions we asked during it, you can find it in the description below. But Martin, thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.